You are here not just to hear words, but to feel them in a deeper place inside you. What we are talking about does not live only in logic or thought. It lives in the hidden parts of the mind, where pain, meaning, shadow, and light all exist together. A place where suffering is not just something to escape, but something that can become a doorway into transformation. I want to speak to you directly, as if you are standing here with me, carrying your own silent story. The quiet weight of what you have endured. The pain of absorbing someone else's darkness. The strange shift that happens when an empath goes through a relationship with a narcissistic presence and somehow survives it. Many people think survival is the end of the journey, but it is not. Survival is only the beginning of what comes after you have been drained, confused, and reshaped by another person's emotional hunger. What remains is not just a wounded self, but the possibility of becoming something entirely new. To understand this, we have to understand what an empath really is in a deeper psychological sense. Not just someone who feels deeply, but someone whose mind and heart became trained early in life to read others in order to survive. As a child, they learn to sense moods, tension, silence, and unspoken emotions in their environment. This sensitivity becomes a way to keep balance in chaos. They become a mirror for what others cannot face within themselves. So, when a narcissistic personality enters their life, it is not random. It is a psychological pattern playing itself out. One person carries unacknowledged shadow and denies it completely, while the other becomes the container that absorbs what is denied. The narcissist protects a fragile inner identity by projecting pain outward. The empath by nature receives it, carries it, and tries to make sense of it, but this comes at a cost. When you absorb what is not yours, you begin to carry emotional poison that was never meant for you, guilt that was never yours, shame that was never yours, anger that does not belong to your story. Over time, this can make you feel like you are losing yourself. Your thoughts become unclear, your emotions feel distorted, and reality itself feels unstable because you are living inside someone else's projection. Yet within this breakdown, something deeper begins to form. In Jungian terms, this is a descent into the shadow, a psychological death of the old self so that a more conscious self can emerge. It feels like disintegration, but it is also initiation. A painful transformation where identity is stripped away so something more real can begin to form underneath. When you come out of this experience, you are no longer the same person who entered it. Something in you has died, but something else has awakened. You have touched darkness directly, not as an idea, but as lived experience. And because of that, you begin to see differently. There is a kind of alchemy in this. Suffering becomes raw material, confusion becomes pressure, emotional pain becomes fire. And slowly, something stronger forms inside you, like gold being refined under heat. You begin to understand people not from theory, but from lived awareness. You no longer see through innocence alone. You see through experience. You recognize patterns faster. You feel manipulation before it fully shows itself. But more importantly, your compassion becomes wiser, not weaker. You understand pain, but you are no longer consumed by it in the same way. It is like a dream where everything appears beautiful at first, a banquet full of abundance. But slowly the illusion breaks. What once looked nourishing turns empty, masks fall, and in that moment of truth, when illusion disappears, something real is revealed underneath. Not perfection, but authenticity. And yes, this transformation leaves marks. You may still carry fear, caution, or echoes of past voices in your mind, but those marks are not just wounds. They are evidence that you lived through something that changed your consciousness. In the end, the empath who survives this kind of experience becomes something different, not just sensitive but aware, not just open but conscious. You do not return unchanged. You return with depth, with sight, with an understanding of human darkness that cannot be unlearned. And maybe that is the real question answered already. You do not become less, you become more real. The empath who is shaped early to carry what is not theirs eventually becomes that container, but the psyche does not leave them there. It pushes them toward a breaking point where identity begins to fragment and a deeper reorganization becomes possible. This is what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, not who you were conditioned to be. In alchemical terms, this is nigredo, the blackening, where everything collapses and old certainties dissolve. It feels like loss, emptiness, even ruin, but within it, transformation begins. When an empath absorbs a destructive emotional dynamic, they may feel emptied or broken, but if they stay conscious through it, a more integrated self begins to form. They become more discerning, no longer giving themselves away blindly. But a danger appears, emotional shutdown. While understandable, becoming emotionally hardened is only another mask. True healing is not to stop feeling, but to stop being consumed by feeling. So the return is not to innocence, but to awareness. You still love and feel deeply, but without self-erasure. This is the wounded healer archetype, someone who understands pain without repeating it. Yet true integration requires deeper honesty, seeing what within you allowed the pattern to happen, the need to be needed, fear of abandonment or self-sacrifice. When this shadow is seen, the cycle weakens. At this point, life becomes initiation. You cannot return to who you were because awareness has replaced innocence. You are no longer easily deceived, but also not closed off. You move through life with clarity, balance, and self-awareness. And from there, you no longer just survive your past. You live from what you have become. He walks through a forest where the silence feels alive, as if something unseen is watching. Whispers rise between the trees, accusing and confusing him, making each step heavier. Then suddenly he enters a clearing. A mirror stands there. In it, he sees himself bound in chains. When he touches it, the chains dissolve. But his reflection's eyes burn with fire. He wakes shaken, realizing he has met a part of himself he avoided for too long. Like this, surviving a painful relationship is not just escape. It is confrontation with both weakness and strength within the self. What once felt like invisible chains of guilt and confusion begins to reveal something deeper, awareness and inner power. Even after it ends, echoes remain. Old voices return in thought, repeating doubt and distortion. But these are not truth, they are leftover projections. The task is not to fear them, but to answer them with a stronger inner voice. I have survived. I am learning myself again. Healing is not linear. Some days feel free, others bring old emotions back, but identity is changing beneath them. You are no longer the same within those feelings. Over time, clarity grows. You begin to see people and patterns more clearly. Illusion loses power. This creates distance, but also protection. What once hurt you now becomes understanding. Your empathy does not end, it matures. You still feel deeply, but you no longer disappear inside others. This is the shift from unconscious feeling to conscious presence. Wholeness is not returning to innocence. It is carrying awareness and openness together without losing yourself in either. The empath who survives carries both truths within them. They are no longer only angel or victim, but fully human, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce, sometimes radiant, sometimes marked by what they have endured. Within this paradox lies individuation itself. You are not just survivors, you are initiates. You have passed through an experience that stripped away what was false, and what remains is more real. Do not say, I am broken. Say instead, I have been remade. Do not let bitterness define you because it turns pain into something permanent. Instead, see your wounds as places where life entered you more deeply. After survival comes a strange silence. It can feel like emptiness, but it is actually inner recalibration. The old identity, built on giving, fixing, or enduring, falls away, and the question arises, who am I now? This is not a crisis, but an opening. In that space, something deeper begins to emerge. Illusions about love, sacrifice, and self-worth dissolve, and inner truth begins to speak quietly through intuition, dreams, and clarity. The psyche is no longer reacting, it is rebuilding. This is the path of the hero, not through conquest, but endurance. You learn to survive distortion without becoming it. From this, you carry back understanding of patterns, projection, and human vulnerability. But survival is not the end. If you stay only in the identity of the broken one who survived, life narrows around the wound. True becoming moves beyond that. The wound transforms into awareness, wisdom, and clarity. And slowly, real change appears in simple ways. The ability to say no without guilt, to see manipulation clearly, to choose yourself without fear, and to stay open without losing yourself. These quiet shifts reshape your entire way of being, not as someone defined by what broke them, but as someone shaped by what they finally learned to see. You become someone who no longer abandons themselves just to keep peace. Someone who can love without losing their center, feel without being swallowed, and give without disappearing into the act of giving. In the end, you become a self that finally belongs to itself. The unconscious works in paradox, and so does your transformation. After absorbing darkness, something in you begins to radiate differently. It is no longer the soft, unguarded light of innocence. It is a more defined light, shaped by experience. A light that does not get easily absorbed by distortion and does not collapse in the presence of illusion. It can illuminate clearly without being dimmed. Because of this, your presence begins to feel different to others. Some will feel comfort in you, others will feel challenged by you. Not because you are trying to provoke anything, but because something in your presence quietly demands honesty. It reflects people back to themselves, and that is part of what you are becoming. Someone who can no longer be easily misread by deception, and who can no longer easily misread themselves either. Imagine again a dream. A woman is walking with a heavy sack on her back, filled with what she believes are only stones. It weighs her down until she can barely continue. Eventually she falls and the sack opens. The stones spill across the ground. At first it looks like loss, like everything she was carrying has been wasted. But as she looks closer, she notices something unexpected. Some of those stones are not stones at all. They are hidden jewels, catching the light in the darkness. What once felt like pure burden reveals itself as something more complex. Not just pain, but also strength formed through pain. Not just suffering, but also awareness born inside it. This is what survival often looks like in hindsight. What once felt like emotional weight, confusion, guilt, or loss slowly reveals another layer. Within it were qualities that were being formed all along: resilience, perception, emotional depth, and clarity. The task is not to deny the suffering, but to recognize what it shaped within you, and then to claim it consciously, instead of unconsciously carrying it. Because what you become after this kind of experience is not just an empath in the old sense. You begin to develop a deeper psychological perception, a kind of instinct for emotional truth. You can sense when something is off, when a mask is being worn, when a pattern is repeating itself beneath the surface. Not through paranoia, but through awareness sharpened by experience. This awareness can feel isolating at times, because you see more than you used to. But it also becomes a form of protection and eventually a form of guidance. Others may not always understand what you see, but they often feel its accuracy. However, there is a deeper layer that must be faced for this transformation to be complete. The experience of the narcissist is not only external, it also activates something internal. A shadow aspect within every human being, the part that wants control, validation, superiority, or emotional dominance in subtle forms. If this inner layer is ignored, the pattern does not end. It simply changes shape. This is why true recovery is not only about healing from what happened to you, but also about understanding what it awakened within you. Freedom does not come from identifying only as the one who was harmed. It comes from recognizing the full internal landscape, including the parts that are uncomfortable to admit, because only what is seen clearly can stop controlling you unconsciously. This is where real individuation begins, when the split within yourself starts to close. The sensitive part of you that feels deeply and the protective part of you that learned to shut down are no longer enemies. They begin to integrate. You become someone who can hold both openness and boundaries at the same time. And in that integration, identity becomes more stable, not because life becomes easier, but because you are no longer divided against yourself. At this stage, freedom is no longer about escaping people or avoiding pain. It becomes the ability to remain yourself regardless of what you encounter. No masks, no self-betrayal, no emotional disappearance. So when the question arises again, who am I now after all of this? There is no single fixed answer. You are not only the empath, not only the survivor, not only the wounded one. You are the combination of all these states transformed into awareness. You are someone who has seen illusion and still chosen clarity. Someone who has touched darkness and not allowed it to define the totality of who you are. Someone who has been changed but not destroyed. And that is the real turning point. You are no longer defined by what happened to you, but by what you have learned to become through it. This knowledge cannot be lost, nor should it be. It becomes the base of your transformation. But transformation itself is not the final stage. The deeper process is integration. To integrate means to weave what you have experienced into the structure of your being, not as poison, but as understanding. You no longer deny it or push it away. You no longer say, that was not me. Instead, you recognize it reached me, but it did not define me. It hurt me, but it also shaped me. It left marks, but those marks now carry meaning. This is why your wounds matter. They are not flaws to erase or memories to discard. They are imprints left by experience, signs that you have walked through something real and returned with awareness. They become evidence that you have lived through descent and come back with insight, and that is where a quiet form of authority is born. Not authority over others, but authority through authenticity. Because when a person has truly been through something and integrated it, their presence speaks for itself. It cannot be easily argued against because it is not based on theory, it is based on lived reality. Here is the paradox of what you become. You are no longer the naive empath who feels everything without boundaries. That version has been reshaped, and you are no longer just a survivor either, because survival alone is not the end goal. What emerges is something more complex, more grounded, more aware. You become the one who has seen both sides of the human psyche, light and shadow, truth and distortion, connection and manipulation. And because of that, you can no longer be easily deceived by appearances alone. You begin to sense what is beneath the surface. Patterns, defenses, masks, and projections. This awareness is both a gift and a burden. It can make you feel distant at times because you no longer experience the world with the same innocence as before. But that distance is not emptiness, it is clarity, and clarity, even when uncomfortable, is freedom. There may be moments when you feel out of place in a world that still runs on illusion. You may notice how easily people are drawn to charisma, how quickly they attach meaning to surface-level images, how often they confuse appearance with truth. And in those moments, you might feel a kind of quiet isolation. But that isolation is not a failure of connection. It is the cost of awareness. And it is also the beginning of a different role in life, not as someone who conforms to illusion, but as someone who sees through it. You become a kind of reference point for authenticity, not by trying to be one, but simply by existing differently. And those who are ready for truth will recognize something in you even if they cannot fully name it. Think again of a dream. A man stands alone at the edge of a vast ocean at night. The waves are violent, and everything about them suggests danger. He feels small in front of their power. At first, he believes entering the water would mean losing himself completely. But then he notices something strange. The ocean is not only dark, it is faintly glowing from within. He steps forward anyway, expecting collapse. But instead of sinking, he floats. The same depth he feared becomes what supports him. What once looked like destruction reveals itself as something he can exist within. And he wakes with the realization that what he feared most was not there to destroy him, but to reveal something in him that he had never known. This is what your transformation resembles. What once felt overwhelming, destabilizing, or even destructive has become something you can now hold awareness within. Not because the danger was not real, but because something in you expanded through it. You begin to understand that the psyche is deeper than any single experience of pain. and that the self is more stable than the identities that were built around survival. So you change in how you move through life. You no longer overextend yourself just to maintain connection. You no longer lose yourself in trying to fix others. You no longer confuse emotional intensity with emotional truth. Instead, you become grounded. You still feel deeply, but you are no longer carried away by what you feel. You still care, but your care is no longer self-erasure. You still love, but not in a way that requires your disappearance. This is where real freedom begins. Freedom is not becoming untouched by life. It is becoming present within it without losing yourself. And in that state, something important settles inside you. You are no longer acting from fear of losing others, or fear of being unworthy, or fear of repeating old patterns. You begin to act from clarity, from choice, from self-recognition. That is individuation in its lived form, not perfection, not emotional invincibility, but integration of opposites within one consciousness, strength and softness, awareness and compassion, boundaries and openness. And slowly, the question shifts. It is no longer only, what did this do to me? It becomes, who am I now that I can see through it? And the answer is no longer fragmented. It is simple but profound. You are the one who remained aware through change. In conclusion, the journey of the empath is not just about surviving pain, but transforming through it. What begins as emotional overwhelm and illusion slowly becomes awareness, strength, and clarity. Through breaking down old identities and facing inner shadows, a deeper self emerges, one that is no longer defined by sacrifice or confusion, but by understanding and choice. You do not return to who you were before because that innocence is replaced by consciousness. Instead, you become someone more grounded, more aware, and more whole. The real ending of this journey is not survival, it is integration, where pain is no longer just something endured, but something transformed into wisdom, presence, and inner freedom.